3 spine-chilling true stories of sinister summer vacations, horrors revealed, hidden and cursed. The Thompson family had grown accustomed to the humdrum of Maplewood, New Jersey. But as summer break arrived, they packed their car with glee, ready to escape to a secluded lakeside cabin. Dad Mike smiled, glancing in the rearview mirror at his daughters, Ellie, wide-eyed with excitement, and 15-year-old Sarah, who half-heartedly masked her enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Mom Linda was on a mission to create unforgettable memories. The road wound through picturesque countryside, the type that lulled you into believing everything was perfect. But lurking somewhere in that tranquility was something sinister, something waiting to ruin their idyllic vacation. As they drove, hazy fields blurred past, and Mike reassured them they would leave the stress of their daily lives behind. Laughter filled the car until they pulled into the rustic gravel driveway of the cabin. Friendly waves from the locals greeted them like an overzealous town welcome committee. Linda felt a wave of relief. This was going to be a great summer. What went unnoticed were the eyes that lingered too long, shadows flitting through the corners of their vision, and whispers that danced through the air, spoken in low tones. When the family passed at dusk, crickets began their symphony, and the Thompsons settled into their cozy abode. It wasn't long, however, before the serenity shattered under the weight of unsettling noises drifting in from the woods. Mike shrugged it off, assuring his family it was just deer rustling in the underbrush. But their confidence was tainted by whispered tales of the lost children of Oakwood, stories that teased the edge of awareness and sent chills racing down their spines. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Later that week, the tension tightened around them like a noose when Ellie and Mike stumbled across an abandoned institution hidden deep within the woods. The rusted gate hung half open as if begging them to come in. Ellie's curiosity bubbled, pushing her to pry the heavy doors apart. Dust swirled, revealing forgotten remnants of a time long gone, classrooms with weary desks, abandoned toys laid strewn across the floor, and haunting photographs of children smiling with an eerie gleam in their eyes. Suddenly, the laughter faded, replaced by a creeping unease that slithered down their backs. Back at the cabin, Sarah's instincts perked as she noted the locals' unnatural stares, their faces morphing from friendly smiles to something more predatory. It felt as though they were being watched, silenced by the central pulse of the forest encroaching closer. With every friendly wave, there was an underlying urgency, a hidden story lurking beneath the surface. The annual local festival turned dark when the community began celebrating the very myths that whispered of unseen danger. Townsfolk danced and laughed, their eyes flickering to the Thompsons, watching with the intensity of those who know something they don't. Just beyond the reach of the bonfire light, figures shifted in the shadows. The flickering flames cast doubts that ignited fear in their hearts. Was this fun, or were they becoming part of a blood-chilling tale spun to frighten the unsuspecting? As night deepened, the sounds in the woods grew louder. They huddled together, heartbeats racing, as shadows loomed closer. A sickening realization curled in their stomachs. Trust was a fragile concept, and someone among those charming locals held a secret more sinister than they could ever fathom. They were being hunted, and slowly, they began to understand, the true terror of their summer vacation had only just begun. The following morning, an uneasy silence enveloped the cabin. Sunlight spilled through the windows, but even its warmth felt like a distant memory. Mike gathered his family, trying to brush off the previous night's events as mere hysteria. "How about some fishing?" he suggested, hoping to revive their spirits. The girls exchanged glances, unsure. But with a reluctant nod from Sarah and bright-eyed enthusiasm from Ellie, they set off toward the lake, each step heavy with apprehension. The air near the water was thick, pressing against their skin like a weight. The blue waves glistened on the surface, deceptive in their tranquility. As they cast their lines, the only sounds were the splashes of the bobbing lures and the occasional birdsong harbingers of a false peace. Minutes turned into forthright hours, filled with strained conversations and forced smiles. Sarah fiddled with her fishing rod, casting glances toward the shore. She couldn't shake the sense of being watched, the whispers of the old tales folding into her mind like dark clouds dispersing the sun. She shifted uneasily, feeling the weight of eyes upon her back. It was unsettling. "Hey! Look over there!" Ellie exclaimed, breaking the tension, pointing toward the far side of the lake where an old, weathered boat drifted aimlessly. It was half submerged, like something lost in time. "Must have been abandoned years ago," Mike muttered, the unease creeping back. "It's probably just junk." But Sarah's heart raced. There was something alive about that boat, something hungry. An irresistible pull. "Let's check it out," Ellie urged, her adventurous spirit ignited. With a few hesitant glances exchanged, they agreed, driven by an unexplainable lure. They pulled their gear out and began wading through the water, each step igniting a swirl of dread. As they approached the boat, they could see that it was deeply weathered, its wood rotting, the paint peeling. But what chilled them to the core was the sight of small, childish handprints smudged over the side, as if tiny fingers had desperately clung on, pleading for help that never came. "Guys, this totally creeps me out," Sarah whispered, glancing back at the shore. She could have sworn that the locals had gathered just beyond the trees, watching with those predatory smiles, shadows amongst shadows. Mike reached out, brushing his fingers against the boat, and recoiled. "Ugh, it feels wrong." He glanced at Ellie, who remained entranced by the sight. Before Sarah could react, Ellie had climbed into the boat. "It's just an old boat," she declared, though her voice trembled slightly. "It's kind of cool." But as Mike held on to the side, he realized there was no way this thing should still be floating. Suddenly, a loud crack resounded, shattering the stillness. The boat tipped dangerously, and Ellie squealed as she slipped, her laughter turning to panic. All at once, a torrent of cold water rushed in. The boat lurched again, pulling Sarah to the edge, but something held her back, a gripping fear that something, or someone, waited just beneath the surface. "Ellie!" Mike shouted, lunging forward. In that frozen moment, Sarah glimpsed a pale hand darting from beneath the water, smooth and eerie, brushing the edge of the boat like a beckoning whisper. A gut-chilling certainty settled over her. That wasn't just an old relic, it was a tomb. As Ellie flailed, fighting against a force pulling her down into the abyss, terror shattered their family's bond. They struggled to save her as the water darkened, something hungry lurking close. Rising panic was masked by the laughter of the townspeople echoing in her mind, taunting cruelly. Desperation surged as Sarah made a split-second choice: save her sister or confront whatever lurked underneath. When the locals finally stepped in closer, eerie smiles painted across otherwise ordinary faces, Sarah's heart sank. "Help us!" she screamed, but doubt filled her. Did they want to help, or were they waiting for the right moment to pull them all down into the depths of the lake? The horror of their summer vacation twisted deeper, and the fight for survival was about to begin. What hidden truths would the water reveal, and what horrors awaited them within the town's smiling facade? Ellie's desperate screams rang out, piercing the eerie quiet of the lake. The water, once a serene blue, now mirrored a deep, ominous black. Each ripple seemed to grasp at her, pulling her further down, further away from the family that was frantically reaching for her. Mike's heart raced, pounding in his chest like an alarm bell. His every instinct screamed to save his daughter. "Hold on, Ellie. Just hold on," he shouted, his voice cracking. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, he lunged toward the edge of the boat, fingertips brushing the slick surface of the water. It was colder than he expected, a chill that wrapped around his body like an unrelenting grip. Sarah, her mind a blur of terror, grabbed Mike's arm, anchoring him. "Don't. What if it pulls you in too?" she stammered, glancing around at the disinterested faces of the townspeople who had gathered. They stood near the trees, watching with those unnerving smiles, their eyes sparkling with an unsettling calm, but the fear for her sister's life propelled Sarah forward, reckless with a mother's instinct. "We can't just let her drown. Then let us get a rope," Mike snapped, breaking from his daughter's grasp. He turned to scan the disheveled shore, and that's when he noticed there was no sign of help nearby. Only the faint echoes of laughter carried through the air, taunting, suffocating. Ellie's shrieks gurgled, transforming into muted bubbles as her head slipped beneath the yawning surface. Panic clawed at Mike's throat. He couldn't let that happen. He took a deep breath and dove, plunging into the depths of the icy lake, the water enveloping him like a shroud. Cold squeezed the air out of his lungs. Mike kicked down, arms flailing as he fought against the dark. The world above faded, the sunlight a distant memory. All around him was murky water, tainted with dread. He could barely see, but visions danced before him, brief glimpses of pale hands reaching out, shadows lurking, waiting. That he felt something brushing against his leg, a fleeting sensation, sharp and ghost-like. Panic surged as he kicked harder, propelling himself downward in search of his daughter. Every second felt like an eternity as the darkness enveloped him. As the murkiness thickened, Mike spotted a shape moving below him, a small figure, still and white against the black. Ellie. His heart slammed against his ribs as he propelled himself towards her. But then, something far larger emerged from the depths, circling, its form like a twisted mass of dread. Mike's mind screamed as he felt it, a push, a pull. Something was drawing him closer to the shrouded form, like moths to a flame. He thought of his family, of Sarah screaming for her sister. He gritted his teeth, fighting against the force, reaching out for Ellie. His hand grazed her arm. She was cold, so cold. Just a little further. Suddenly, both hands clutched his calf, yanking him down. Horror coursed through him. It was the water, the depths wanting revenge. He struggled and kicked, a swirl of chaos erupting around him as he fought, desperation lending power to his limbs. Back above, the townspeople remained still, smiling, their faces now blending into grotesque masks of glee. Sarah screamed for Mike and Ellie, but her pleas fell into none but indifferent ears. They watched, seemingly entertained by the struggle unfolding before them. Then, with a final scream, Mike broke the surface, gasping for air, the sunlight striking his face like a beacon of hope. He clutched Ellie to his chest, her limp body nearly lost in the water's monstrous embrace. She was breathing, but just barely. He could feel it, a faint flutter beneath his palm, an inrush of tenacity, a flicker of life, but the lake didn't relent. The ominous grip tightened again, and before he could pull Ellie back to the boat, a force stirred beneath them. It was coy and dark, a single, slithering shadow rising. Panic ignited once more as he heard the townspeople's laughter morph into a deep, sinister chorus, echoing hauntingly in the air. The grip of the lake pulled Ellie deeper into its depths once more. Sarah and Mike exchanged panicked glances, a shock of realization mingling with despair. They were not just fighting for their girl, they were now entangled in something much bigger, much darker than any of them understood. In that twisted moment of horror, they finally understood. The lake had chosen its prey, and this summer vacation was about to unravel in ways they never could have imagined. What unseen forces were at play, and who among the onlookers was truly an ally, and who was undeniably a foe? Mike clawed at the water, desperately dragging Ellie to the surface. With each stroke, the lake seemed to fight back, as if 1,000 hands were pulling him down. He couldn't give up, not now. He could almost hear Sarah's voice piercing through the chaos, urging him on, but the laughter around them only deepened the horror. It echoed like a nightmare, relentless and suffocating. As he reached the edge of the boat, adrenaline clawing at his throat, he heaved Ellie up, his hands trembling. She slipped from his grasp, slipping back into the inky depths. His heart stopped. He lunged again, managing to grip her lifeless arm. He hoisted her up, hauling her aboard in a frenzy. "Ellie! Please!" Sarah cried, her voice a mix of anguish and disbelief. But just as he pulled her onto the boat, the unseen force beneath surged upward, drawing Mike perilously close to the gaping maw of the lake. It felt as if the water swirled with malevolence, no longer just a body of water but a sinister entity with its eyes on them, thriving on their fear. "No! Not again!" Mike shouted, pulling Ellie close, desperately checking for any sign of life. Her skin was pale, lips blue, but she was breathing. A slight rise and fall, almost imperceptible. "Mike, we need to get her out of here." Sarah squeezed his arm, her own eyes wild with terror. But the townsfolk stayed rooted in place, their looks morphed into grins that seemed more predatory than supportive. Why were they just standing there, watching? It made Mike's skin crawl. "Help us!" he pleaded, his voice breaking. Yet, their laughter darkened, bubbling like toxins in the air. More shadows danced in the lake's depths, stretching and curling like whispers, taunting them. With Ellie in his arms, Mike clambered back onto the boat, heart racing. "Get the engine started, Sarah," he barked, not waiting for a response. Behind them, the water roiled and foamed, hissing as if the lake itself carried a grudge and ancient vengeance against the world above it. "Mike, the rope! Tie her to something!" Sarah shrieked, fumbling for the supplies. As Mike fumbled with the rope, fear coursed through him, thick and palpable. He glanced down into the dark water and froze. The shadows were gathering beneath, swirling in chaotic patterns. He could almost make out shapes' faces, twisted in torment, reaching up with clawed hands. It was as if the forgotten of the lake were calling out, begging for release, and now they were hungry for the living. "Our daughter," he thought. "They'd take Ellie, he couldn't let that happen. Just hold on, Ellie," he pleaded, his fingers trembling as he bound a knot to keep her secure. Above them, the townspeople's laughter escalated, an eerie soundtrack to their desperate escape. As the engine roared to life, Mike glanced at Sarah, her face paled even further, eyes wide, drinking in the chaotic scene before them. "Go! Go!" she screamed, adrenaline pushing her voice to a fever pitch. As the boat propelled away from the shore, Mike felt a fierce tug, as if the lake was trying to seize them, dragging them back. The glee of the crowd reached a fevered pitch, each laugh like a dagger, a cackle of hunger unsated. "Faster! Just go!" Mike shouted, struggling to keep Ellie safe as he probed her pulse once more. It was weak. Suddenly the lake quieted, and the townspeople fell silent. The laughter slipped away, replaced by a stillness so deep, it felt like the calm before an inevitable storm. "Did we lose it?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. But as they surged away from the shore, Mike caught a glimpse of the water behind. A single dark figure broke the surface, its eyes glowing like embers in the night. It lingered for a moment, silent and watching, before vanishing beneath the waves like a predator stalking its prey. "What was that?" Mike gasped, dread spilling over him. The tension in the air thickened, and he felt it, the weight of eyes on them, the knowledge that something had been unleashed. Would it come for them again? As they sped away, Mike realized with a horrified shiver, the lake was watching, and it would not be satisfied. What had they awakened? Was this a fight to survive or a haunting they could never escape? Then, Michael saw them standing among the trees once more, figures emerging from shadows. Who were they? Friends turned foes? With each ragged breath, he knew, no one was safe, not even from the very people who seemed to share in their blood-curdling fear. And if they ever wanted to escape this nightmare, they would have to unveil the truth behind the laughter. The boat kicked up a froth of waves, slicing through the water like a knife. Mike's hands were slick with sweat and fear as he held Ellie close, her unconscious form trembling against the chill of the night air. The engine roared, yet it wasn't loud enough to drown out the silence reverberating from the shore. Sarah peered over her shoulder, eyes darting, every shadow a potential threat. "Do you see them?" she gasped, breathless. "No." Mike gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the black water trailing behind them. But even as he said it, the memory of those glowing eyes stained his vision. Whatever it was, something sinister beckoned them from the depths. They cut further away from the shore, but peace was broken by that horrible laughter, swirling back like a malicious wind, haunting the air around them. Mike's heart raced faster than the boat sped across the surface. Why wouldn't it just stop? I don't like this, Mike, Sarah said, trembling visibly. I feel like something's coming for us. In the distance, the starlit sky hung heavy with anticipation. He could almost believe the moon had turned its back, too frightened to watch what would unfold. As they barreled forward, a sudden ripple surged through the water, reminiscent of a creature stirring beneath. Ellie! He cried out, his voice unsteady. He gently shook her awake, desperate for a response. Her eyes fluttered, but she remained still, caught in a realm between consciousness and the dark embrace of the lake. Please, Ellie. His voice cracked. Wake up. But nothing came. The weight in Mike's chest felt unbearable, an anchor of hopelessness as he cradled her. In that moment, the world around him morphed into a blurred nightmare. Sounds twisted into a nightmarish symphony, each laugh more sinister than the last, but it was the silence in the boat that unnerved him most. Why won't they help? Sarah's voice trembled. She was staring at the trees lining the shoreline, as if expecting someone to leap out. They can't be this cruel. Mike said, his eyes darting to the shoreline. The figures were still there, shadows lurking, waiting. Were they waiting for Ellie? For him? Another surge rocked the boat, sending them both stumbling. What was that? Mike shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He grabbed the edge to steady himself, then it came, the laughter rising to a fever pitch as if something had decided they were prey, and the lake was merely a trap set for the unwary. Go! Faster! Sarah screamed, and Mike's fingers fumbled to twist the throttle, the boat trembling beneath them. Behind them, the water erupted. A massive shape broke the surface, churning the lake into a whirlpool of dark chaos. The glow of those eyes pierced through the fury. It was no longer a mere shadow, it was a grotesque silhouette, a nightmare given life, bearing down on them. Mike! Sarah shrieked, panic overtaking her voice. It's coming! Hold on! He shouted, desperation fueling him as he pushed the engine to its limit. The vessel screeched with power, but just as he hoped they'd leave the terror behind, the bigger shape surged forward, closing the distance ready to snatch them from the boat. Cold dread settled in the pit of Mike's stomach. We have to make it to the dock. But as they sped toward safety, he realized something chilling. The shadows weren't just monstrous in the lake. They crept along the shoreline, marching like soldiers awaiting orders from a twisted commander. Each figure grinned wider than the last, eyes glistening with a hunger that sent ice through his veins. That he turned to Sarah, her face drained of color, reflecting his own fear. We can't stop. We can't give in. As they approached the dock, shouts erupted from the figures. Leave her. One of them howled, voice thick with malice. She belongs to us. Mike gripped the throttle, but a bone-deep cold swept through him. The laughter crescendoed, shaking his core. Ellie! He roared, turning to her, but she lay completely still. What do we do? Sarah gasped, her hands clenching into fists. God, I want to let them take her. I'll never let them. But as they nearly reached the dock, he saw the water bubbling violently again, an eruption that promised to swallow them whole if they got too close. Panic ensued, his heart hammering against his ribcage as the figures lunged forward, laughter echoing in his ears like death knells. Then he realized, as the boat screeched, skidding dangerously toward the dock, that perhaps this was the twisted plan all along. Was the lake merely their guardian, or had it cursed everything that dared disturb its peace? Mike! Sarah screamed, the color draining from her face. He searched for answers in the chaos, but all he knew was they had to fight, and sometimes it wasn't just monsters hiding in the dark. They wore familiar faces, hiding behind the uncaring watches of the living. As the darkness loomed nearer, Mike felt the lake's gaze penetrate deeper, an unyielding hunger that thrust reality upon him. The laughter, however distant, never left. What trap awaited them once they reached the dock? Would they survive, or was this just the beginning of an unfathomable nightmare that even this solemn darkness feared to reveal? The boat lurched violently as the dock loomed ahead, the wooden structure seeming to tremble in anticipation of their arrival. Mike's heart pounded in his ears, drowning out the faded laughter that haunted them. "Brace yourself," he yelled to Sarah, his knuckles white against the throttle. The air was thick with dread as they raced toward the dock, the figures on the shore morphing into terrible faces, their mouths stretching wide in predatory glee. The moment they hit the dock, Mike flung the boat into reverse, desperate to escape the gang of shadowy figures that now surrounded them. "Get Ellie. I'll hold them off," he shouted, abandoning hope for the motor as it sputtered in his urgency. Sarah hesitated, but Mike's frantic eyes gave her no choice. She lunged over the railing, dragging Ellie's limp body toward the worn wooden boards while Mike fumbled with what he could find: an oar, a cold piece of timber. It was hardly a weapon, but desperation transformed it into a shield. "Release her," a voice thundered from the shadows. The figures advanced, eagerness in their movements paired with the glints of hungry eyes. "She does not belong to you. This isn't happening," Mike shouted, swinging the oar wildly. Each strike connected with nothing but the air thick with terror. They only laughed back, taunting him like a cruel game. "We will feast on her," another voice sing-songed from the darkness. "She belongs to the depths now. You cannot outrun your fate." Mike gritted his teeth, shoving panic down. "Get away from her." He aimed another feeble swing at the nearest figure, catching its shoulder, but it only laughed harder, unfazed, the sound echoing with eerie resonance. But then he felt it a pulling at his mind, like thick tendrils snaking into his thoughts. The laughter shifted, becoming a murmur that insinuated itself deeper, words coiling around his consciousness. "Join us, it's better down here, no." He slapped his palms against his temples, willing the whispers to evaporate. "I want tea." The figures leaned closer, their laughter morphing into something more chilling, a cacophony of promise and threat. "You'll never leave. You all are ours. We just need to invite you in." Ellie stirred, a flicker of life beneath the haze of fear. "Mike?" she whispered, struggling to lift her head. "Ellie." Relief coursed through him like a drug, and he turned to her, momentarily distracted. His guard slipped, and before he could react, a figure lunged forward, wrapping icy fingers around his wrist. "Help me!" Mike screamed at Sarah, but the shadows were quick, swarming toward him, swallowing the distance faster than he could fight. The whispers grew louder, blending with Ellie's fading words until he felt them drilling into him, demanding that he surrender, that he join this dark communion. "Let go of him!" Ellie cried, finally pushing herself up. She looked weak, but determination ignited something in her eyes. "Fight back, Mike." With a surge of willpower, Mike pulled against the icy grip, channeling his fear into rage. "I want to let you take me. Not today." He thrust the oar toward the figure holding him, but it melted back into the darkness, laughter ringing like a bell. "You can't escape us, little man. You're already part of the game." The laughter drifted off into silence, leaving Mike breathless with uncertainty. Sarah reached Ellie's side, desperately checking her pulse, but Mike felt the presence of the figures sharpening, their inky shadows heightening the tension around them. "Don't lose hope," Ellie whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "We have to keep fighting. Together." But as she steadied herself, Mike watched in horror as the shadows began to shift and writhe, like a living wall surrounding them. "We need to get out of here," he shouted, but where was the escape? The dock felt like a prison, the lake a hungry maw ready to ensnare them all. "Swim!" Sarah yelled suddenly, a bright idea cutting through the panic. "We have to jump and swim for the other side." It was a risk, one that carried the weight of despair. But the figures were gaining momentum, laughter echoing. Like 1,000 mocking voices. As they prepared to leap into the dark waters, Mike glanced back toward the shoreline. What if we're not fast enough? He thought. What if we can't escape? With a final glance at the dark figures surging forward, he took a deep breath. Maybe the lake wasn't the true danger, maybe just maybe it was the very thing that lay beneath the surface, waiting for them to take that plunge. And as he dashed toward the edge of the dock with Ellie and Sarah, he heard an unsettling rumble from below, an awakening that promised more horrors than the ones already stalking them. What waited beneath the dark waters? Would they have the strength to emerge unscathed, or were they destined to join the laughter echoing from the depths? Mike's heart raced as he felt the pull of the shadows at his back, wrapping around him like icy tendrils. The laughter grew louder, crackling through the air like an electric charge. He was on the brink of plunging into the murky depths, but he hesitated. What if the lake had a more sinister secret than he dared to imagine? Jump! Sarah screamed, her voice slicing through the chaos. In that split second, Mike grabbed Ellie's arm, pulling her close. They shared a look, one of shared terror, the bond of desperation fueling their fight for survival. Before he could dwell too long on their fate, they launched themselves into the water. The shock was immediate. Cold engulfed him, freezing his bones, an icy grip that sank into him deeper than any shadow. They submerged for a moment, the murky water swallowing them whole. Panic surged as Mike's instincts kicked in, forcing him to kick and claw his way back to the surface. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around his limbs as they struggled upward. Ellie's hand was tightly clasped in his, and that connection gave him strength. They broke through the surface, gasping for air, the moonlight guiding them as they fought against the waves. The whispers faded, but the laughter lingered like a foul stench. Mike darted a glance back, terror clutching at his throat. The shadows swarmed the dock, flickering in and out of sight, as if mocking their desperate escape. Over here! Sarah shouted, motioning toward the faint outline of the opposite bank, distant but illuminated by a faint glow. We need to reach the shore. Together, they kicked against the water, adrenaline surging through their veins. Mike glanced at Ellie, who struggled to keep pace but remained resolutely focused. A thrill of fear rushed through him when he realized how vulnerable they were, isolated in this vast, dark lake with no sign of help. As they inched closer to the shore, the water felt thicker, resisting their movements. It was as if something beneath the surface was clawing back. A gust of wind rippled the water, sending waves crashing around them. Mike could hear something crashing through the surface, stirring the depths as if the lake were about to reveal its hidden horrors. Suddenly, Ellie screamed, a sound that pierced the night. Something's pulling me. Her legs kicked furiously, but she began to sink. Mike's heart plummeted. He twisted around, reaching for her, the cold water wrapping around him like a shroud. No! I'll get you. He lunged toward her, grabbing her hand. But the pull grew stronger, an invisible force tugging her back into the depths. Sarah was already there, fighting against the water's grip, her strength despite the icy depths lifting Ellie back toward the surface. Hold on! Sarah yelled. Together, they pulled her as Mike kicked furiously, desperate to keep her from being dragged under. With every ounce of energy, they heaved Ellie toward the bank. But as they struggled to swim, faint figures began to emerge from the water, their shapes gliding with unnatural grace through the darkness. Their eyes glowed, watching, waiting. Keep swimming! Mike shouted, fear shredding his voice as panic swept over him. The laughter resumed, chilling as they approached the bank. Would they make it before the darkness claimed them? As they neared the edge, an icy grip latched onto Mike's leg. He screamed and kicked out, but the water clawed at him, pulling him downward. Mike! Ellie's voice rang out, panic slicing through the air, and he could see the desperation etched on her face. In that moment, he realized the figures were more than shadows. They were hungry. Just as he felt himself beginning to sink, the moonlight flickered strangely against the surface of the lake. Shapes beneath the water writhed, a mass of horrors waiting for their chance, and then, in the heart of chaos, he heard a voice call out from the depths, clear and dark. "Join us." What awaited them once they reached the shore? Or would the lake claim them as it had claimed so many before? With every stroke, every heartbeat, Mike fought against the inevitable. But how much longer could they resist the call from below? Mike gasped as the icy grip tightened around his leg, dragging him backwards. He thrashed, but the water was a living thing, a smothering blanket of dread. The laughter, echoing in the night, felt like a taunt. His eyes darted to Ellie and Sarah as they clawed their way towards the shore, fighting off the relentless embrace of the lake. Panic surged in his chest, blurring everything around him. "Swim!" he yelled, his voice strangled by the water. But the shadows, those creeping horrors, were drawing him down, leaving him gasping for breath just beneath the surface. "Mike!" Ellie cried, her voice a lifeline amid the chaos. She turned, her eyes wide with fear, and in that moment, he could see her determination. It ignited a fire in him. With every ounce of strength, he kicked against the merciless current. He had to get to her, he had to hold on to that glimmer of hope. Suddenly, another tug pulled him deeper. Mike realized with a sickening dread that the figures were circling him now, their glowing eyes watching his every movement. They were toying with him, like predators savoring the last moments of their prey. Desperation surged, and he let out a primal scream that echoed through the depths. The water vibrated, distorting the sounds around him. He felt the darkness around him pulsating, a heartbeat of something monstrous lurking just beneath. Ellie reached out, her hand stretched, fingers brushing against his. The touch sent a shockwave of determination through him. "I'm not leaving you," he shouted, flinging himself toward her, ignoring the pain that shot through every limb. With an act of sheer will, Mike shifted his body, forcing the weight of the shadows off him for a split second. He surged towards Ellie, grasping her hand as they both fought against the thresher-like claws of the water that still pulled at them. "Faster!" Sarah cried, her own strength faltering, but she was almost there, a beacon of willpower. The shore was only a few more strokes away, glimmering under the moonlight, a promise they might escape the nightmare. They broke through again, chests heaving for precious air. The laughter swirled around them like a malignant fog, twisting bitterness into their relief. Mike felt a cold wave of despair wash over him as shadows flickered just beneath the surface, hungry and relentless. "Don't look back," Mike urged, forcing himself to keep moving, but he couldn't help it. His eyes darted toward the figures that slinked below, constantly watching, judging. They were no longer just silhouettes, sharp teeth glinted in the darkness, and slick bodies undulated with an unnatural fluidity, a nightmare creeping from the depths. Suddenly, the water erupted behind them. A creature, a hideous amalgamation of scales and flesh, burst from the lake, its maw wide open, revealing rows of jagged teeth that dripped with the glistening promise of doom. Both girls screamed, forcing Mike to yell, "Swim! Go, now!" Fueled by terror, they kicked harder, the bank growing closer yet still feeling impossibly far. They were mere moments away from refuge, but the lake's final onslaught struck with ferocity as grasping hands shot from beneath, grabbing at their ankles. Mike launched forward in a frantic leap, pulling Ellie with him as he clawed his way onto the rocky ground. He rolled onto the shore, pulling her with him. They lay gasping, desperately pushing the remnants of shock from their lungs, but Sarah had vanished from view. "Where's Sarah?" Ellie gasped, looking back, panic threatening to swallow her whole. Mike looked around frantically. "No sign of her." "Stay here, I'll find her," Mike shouted, still reeling from the encounter, but he felt the weight in his gut. The shadows were gone, but the air around them buzzed with a sinister energy, and he could sense the lake's hunger. As he prepared to jump back into the water, a chilling voice echoed through the night, smooth and seductive. "You cannot escape us." The darkness seemed to slither closer, weaving around him, and Mike felt the thrilling grip of fear once again. He hesitated. Had they truly escaped? Or was this just the calm before the storm? Could he really face what lay beneath the surface? What were those things, and what had they done to Sarah? The unanswered questions gnawed at him, the night stretching on, heavy with terror's lingering sting. And above all, that haunting whisper followed him, a promise that something was still waiting for them. The night air was thick with a tangible dread. Mike's heart raced as he turned back toward the dark, undulating surface of the lake. His mind replayed the events that had just unfolded, Ellie's desperate grasp, the sickening feeling of something looming just below, and now the chilling promise of what lay beneath. Mike! Ellie's voice trembled, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. She was sitting on the rocky shore, eyes wide, searching for Sarah's pale figure among the waves. The moonlight glinted off the water, illuminating nothing but the ominous ripples, as if the lake itself were taunting them to take another look. "Stay here," he warned, his voice a low whisper, choked with the weight of despair. He needed to find Sarah, but dread clung to him like a second skin. The lake pulsed, a heart of darkness beating steadily beneath. As he edged closer to the water, a faint splash drew his attention. He held his breath, squinting into the inky depths. "Sarah!" he yelled, voice strained. Silence wrapped around him like a noose, but just when he thought he would have to plunge into that murky hell, a shape emerged, a flailing hand breaking the surface. "Help!" Sarah's voice pierced through the night, a fragile thread of hope. She was struggling, the water rushing up to her elbows, and from the way she thrashed, it was clear she was being pulled back, not by the depths, but something else. Mike dove forward, adrenaline shaking his limbs. "I'm coming." He fought the cold, wrapping his fingers around her wrist, but another hand clamped onto her other arm. It was slick, ghastly, like a living shadow. Struggling against the tide of terror, he pulled Sarah with all his might. "Hold on!" He screamed over the laughter that swirled in the air, echoing like a sinister chorus, urging him to let go. She kicked and splashed, panic etched on her face, but those hands thin and clammy gripped her tighter. In that moment, he realized how wrong it was. Whatever dwelt beneath wasn't merely after them, it thrived on their fear, feeding off the chaos that gripped them. "Ellie!" he shouted, but the words barely left his mouth before she screamed. An eruption of water erupted behind Mike, and in a harrowing flash, he caught sight of the creature's maw yawning wide like a gaping pit of existence, and a monstrous eye locked onto him with a predatory glint. "Keep swimming!" he yelled, instinctively tugging Sarah back towards the shore. Just as they broke through the water's surface, he felt a sudden jolt. Its fingers scraped against his leg, razor sharp, tearing into his flesh. A jolt of pain shot through him, grounding him in the reality of his fear. They reached the shore, but Mike was still connected to the nightmare, and in a last act of desperation, he spun around and launched himself towards the water's edge. "No! Stay back!" Ellie screamed, but his heart raced faster than terror, and the beast behind him writhed in the dark. He grasped at the water, splashing against the surface as if he could wrench it apart. "Sarah!" he cried, watching her slump against a rock, breathless and wide-eyed. The laughter faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. Mike felt the darkness pulsate beneath his feet, rising like currents from the depths. Just when he thought they might finally be safe, he felt a cold breath on his neck, a whisper that chilled him to the bone. "Join us," it beckoned sweetly. He turned, heart racing, to find shadows gathering around him, creeping closer, threatening to pull him back into the embrace of the icy waters. With a final look at Ellie and Sarah, he knew he had to make a choice: fight against the darkness or succumb to it. In that heartbeat of indecision, the water stirred violently, and the whispers escalated into a cacophony of rage and hunger. Would they all be claimed by the forgotten depths of the lake? Mike clenched his fists, determination lighting his chest. "We will fight." But then, out of the chaos, something shifted in the water. At its center, a glowing form began to rise, shimmering with depthless power. Was it a savior? Or had they awakened something far worse? As the light flickered, Mike's breath caught. Was it too late to escape? The soft light illuminated the chaos around them, casting shadows that danced with an eerie gleam. Mike's heart hammered as he stared into the depths of the lake, where the shimmering glow contrasted sharply with the darkness. Was this a beacon of hope or the harshest trick of fate? Ellie. Sarah. Swim. He shouted, breaking through the dread that wrapped around them like fog. The shimmering form pulsed rhythmically, almost beckoning. The figures in the water paused, mesmerized by the light, giving Mike a momentary breath of relief. They staggered closer to the shore, scrambling over rocks and mud while panic pushed them forward. With every desperate movement toward safety, Mike's gaze lingered on that strange light, curiosity battling against fear. What if it was their only chance? Somehow, the light felt warmer, almost familiar, like a flame in the distance guiding lost souls home. Keep going. We can't let them take us. Sarah urged, her voice shaky but resolute. The shadows twitched, now uncertain, as if battling amongst themselves over their next move. Suddenly, the glowing form flickered with anger. The laughter resumed, louder and more ominous, filling the night air with twisted mockery. You think you can escape? It crooned, the voice slithering into their minds, squeezing hope down to a whisper. Nothing can save you. Cackled another voice, rising from the depths, sinister and dark, the promise of dread wrapped tight around their hearts. Don't listen. Mike shouted, forcing himself to focus on his daughters. He reached for them, grasping their hands tightly. We're not giving in. We'll fight. As they neared the shore, Ellie's strength started to wane. Stay with me, Ellie. Mike shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins like fire. But even as he urged her on, he could see fear creeping back into her eyes, cold shadows pulling at her very spirit. With a final push, they broke free from the water, collapsing onto the bank. They gasped for air, and Mike quickly scanned the horizon. What had once felt like an escape seemed to shift. Shadowy figures regrouped near the water's edge, snarling with hungry ferocity. Stay close. I want to let them take you. He growled, tightening his grip around the girl's hands, but the lake bubbled menacingly as if angry for their escape. If it's a choice between fear and freedom, fight. Sarah screamed, channeling an energy that felt incandescent in its rage. They're nothing more than a haunting, we control our fate, not them. With resolve, the trio turned to face the dark mass looming over them, the shoreline flickering with the outlines of grotesque figures grinning wider than before. You shouldn't have come here. The shadows hissed, their words dripping with venom. No more. Mike bellowed, standing taller, drawing strength from his love for his daughters. The three of them formed a united front, fists raised. This ends now. With that rallying cry, an unseen force surged in the air. The glowing figure from the lake began to rise again, illuminating the demon-like shadows creeping along the shoreline. The sudden light pushed the darkness away, bearing the reality of the chaotic night. And with that light, Mike felt an ancient power surge through him, a whisper of support emanating from the light. The shadows recoiled, snarling in frustration, as the radiant form reached out like a protective bubble around the Thompsons. You are stronger than we imagined, it intoned. But the lake is restless. Then let us end this. Mike yelled, raising his hands, channeling that power, forcing the shadows backward. Sarah and Ellie joined hands with him, and a sudden wave of warmth engulfed them, igniting warmth in a sea of coldness. It surged against the twisted figures, pushing them back, slashing at the darkness until only silence remained. The laughter stopped. The shadows dissipated as they retreated, defeated by the light and the sheer will that coursed through the Thompsons. Breathless, they fell to their knees, clutching each other. Mike looked over at Ellie and Sarah, seeing the flicker of hope return in their eyes. We did it, he whispered, unable to shake the shadows of fear still clinging to him. But then, with an eerie sigh, the lake swirled once more, the calm unsettling, as though it were merely biding its time. They had escaped for now, but the tension of the unknown loomed. Are we really free? Ellie asked, her breath shaking slightly. Only if we choose it, Sarah responded, her voice steadier now. In that moment of fragile hope, the Thompsons realized something monumental. They had come together against a force far more daunting than they had ever anticipated. A profound bond had been forged in terror, bringing clarity. Darkness could only thrive in divided hearts. If they stuck together, they could face whatever came next. As they turned to leave, the glow from the lake danced quietly on the fringe of their vision. It was a reminder, a warning of sorts. They might walk away today, but the shadows could resurface as long as they were in its grasp. The road ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: their summer vacation had taught them that true horror isn't just lurking beneath the surface, it's how they respond to it that counts. As they left the lake behind, the woods felt less oppressive. They'd carry this moment in their hearts as a shield against whatever came next, forever changed by the horrors they'd face together. But as they drove away, something lingered at the edge of their vision, a flicker, another laugh from the trees, echoing into the night. Maybe next summer, Mike said cautiously, glancing back one last time. Let's not, Sarah replied, her voice firm. The road ahead stretched long, but it felt like home, and home was more than just a place, it was the unbreakable bond of family, and with that understanding, they pushed into the night, ready to conquer whatever may come, together. Now, here's where you come in. You need to subscribe to the channel immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that could chill your summer nights. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your love for the journey we just shared. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this mind-bending ending. What do you think will happen next? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything, and only true fans understand how vital their action is.